The slap came so fast, I didn't have time to react. My glasses went flying, shattering on the elegant ballroom floor, as 130 guests watched in absolute silence. My cheek burned, but the pain in my chest was far worse. Kevin, my son-in-law, had just slapped me on his wedding day because I refused to hand over the keys to my apartment. That's what you get for being so selfish. Oh, man. He screamed at me in front of everyone. A man your age doesn't need so much space. The silence that followed was deafening. No one moved to help me as I crouched down, trembling, to pick up my broken glasses. Some guests looked away, uncomfortable. Others whispered among themselves. But no one, absolutely no one, dared to defend the poor old father-in-law, who had just been publicly humiliated. My daughter Jasmine stood motionless, her gaze fixed on the floor as if I were invisible. "You're not welcome here anymore," Kevin continued, adjusting his expensive tuxedo. "Jasmine and I need our privacy to start our new life. Your apartment would be perfect for us, while we shop for something better." His words were pure venom. For months, I had endured his condescending comments about my worn-out clothes, my old car, my simple life, but this had crossed a line that should never have been touched. I rose slowly, feeling all eyes on me like sharp daggers. Tears streamed down my face, but inside something had changed forever. That slap wasn't just a physical blow. It was a final straw. For years, I had kept a low profile, living with humility and discretion. I had secrets no one, not even my own daughter, knew. Memories of the last few months began to bombard my mind as I slowly walked toward the exit. I remembered when Kevin first came to my apartment 2 years ago. His face fell when he saw my modest home, my old furniture, my small kitchen. "Seriously, this is where Jasmine's dad lives?" He had asked her, his voice just loud enough for me to hear. From that moment on, every visit had been a silent torture. "Luther, you should move to a smaller place," he had told me 3 months ago during a family dinner. "At your age, you can't maintain such a big apartment. Besides, Jasmine and I are thinking of having kids soon. We'll need more space." His fake smile didn't fool anyone except my daughter, who seemed to lose her personality whenever he spoke, acting like a puppet on a string. The humiliations had escalated gradually. First, it was the comments about my clothes. "Luther, don't you have anything more modern to wear?" Then it was about my car. "That truck is so old. It's dangerous for you to drive that." Next, it was my part-time job at the local hardware store. "I don't understand why a man your age is still working instead of relaxing." Each phrase was a small poisoned dagger stabbing at my self-esteem. My name is Luther Hughes. I am 68 years old, and all my life I have been a man who prefers discretion over ostentation. I work at a small hardware store 3 days a week. I drive a 10-year-old truck. I buy my clothes at discount stores. To the outside world, especially to Kevin, I am just a middle-class widower living on a fixed income. But that's exactly the image I have carefully cultivated for decades. What none of those people looking at me with pity knew was that my life had been completely different before my wife passed. My wife, Eleanor, had not been the simple homemaker everyone believed. We had made a conscious decision to live modestly, to keep our true wealth a secret, to protect our family's privacy in a way that I now understood had been prophetic. As I walked out of the ballroom, the guest conversations followed me like a toxic cloud. "Poor thing, he looks so fragile," whispered Kevin's aunt. "The groom is right. That man can't take care of himself anymore," added Jasmine's cousin. "He should be in a retirement home, not living alone." Another guest commented with false compassion. Each word was like acid pouring on open wounds. The cool temperature of the ballroom's air conditioning contrasted sharply with the suffocating heat in my chest. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my cell phone in my worn jacket pocket, a jacket I had used for 5 years. Not because I couldn't afford a new one, but because I had learned to value practicality over appearances. Something my son-in-law would clearly never understand. I dialed a number I knew by heart, a number I hadn't used in over a year, because I had naively hoped it would never be necessary. "Mr. Brooks, it's Luther. I need you to come to the Royal Oaks ballroom immediately." "Yes, right now. Bring the documents you know about. It's time for them to know the truth." My voice trembled, but there was a firmness in it I hadn't felt in a long time. "Are you sure, Mr. Hughes?" Mr. Brooks asked, with his professional but concerned voice. "Once we do this, there's no turning back." I glanced back at the ballroom one last time, where I could see Kevin laughing with his friends, likely telling them how he had put his useless father-in-law in his place. Jasmine was by his side, smiling weakly, showing not a single ounce of remorse for what she had just witnessed. "Completely sure," I replied. 30 minutes, Brooks. No more." I hung up the phone and walked toward my truck with determined steps. For the first time in years, I was going to drop the mask I had used to protect my family. For the first time, they were going to meet the real Luther Hughes. And when that happened, when reality hit their perfect fake worlds, they would understand the true meaning of the word regret. The parking lot was quiet, lit by streetlights that cast long shadows between the cars. I sat in my old truck and waited 30 minutes for their lives to change forever. 30 minutes for them to discover they had made the biggest mistake of their lives by humiliating the man who had secretly been taking care of them more than they could ever imagine. While I waited in my truck, memories of how I had reached this moment began to flood my mind like an unstoppable avalanche. It had all started exactly 2.5 years ago, when Jasmine came to my apartment with that nervous smile I knew so well from when she was a girl. "Dad, I want you to meet someone very special," she had told me. And there he was, Kevin, with his perfectly styled hair, his designer clothes, and that smile that didn't reach his eyes. From the very first moment, I knew something wasn't right. The way he looked at my apartment, evaluating every corner with thinly veiled disdain, told me everything I needed to know about his intentions. "How cozy," he had murmured, as he looked at my second-hand furniture and my sun-faded curtains. His tone suggested the opposite. Jasmine, completely blinded by what she believed was love, didn't notice the condescension in his voice. That first dinner had been a silent disaster. Kevin barely touched the food I had lovingly prepared, claiming he was watching his diet. When I asked him about his family, he gave evasive answers, but not before asking me about my financial situation, with a curiosity that I found alarming. "And how do you manage on a widower's pension, Luther? It must be hard to get by on so little money," he had said with fake concern. What Kevin didn't know was that I had been observing him as much as he had been observing me. Over the next few months, I began to notice patterns that put me on high alert. Every time they visited my apartment, he would make comments about how outdated everything was, about how I deserved something better in my golden years. But his eyes always lingered on the details that really mattered: the prime location of the building, the panoramic view from my balcony, the size of the rooms. One day, while Jasmine was in the bathroom, I heard him speaking softly on the phone in my kitchen. "Yes, Mom, her dad's apartment is in a super expensive area. If I can get him to move to a smaller place, we could stay here until we have our own place. He's so naive he'll probably even thank us for helping him with the transition." His words cut through me like a knife, but I maintained my composure when he returned to the living room, feigning innocence. From that moment on, every interaction with Kevin became a carefully orchestrated performance on both our parts. He played the concerned son-in-law, worried about his father-in-law's well-being, while I pretended to be the vulnerable old man who needed guidance. But inside, I was gathering information, observing his moves, understanding his true motivations. It was like a game of chess where we both thought we were winning. The following months brought a gradual escalation in his attempts at manipulation. First, there were the subtle suggestions. Luther, I've seen some lovely apartments for people your age, with all-inclusive services and no maintenance worries. Then came the more direct pressures. You can't keep living alone at your age. It's dangerous. What if you fall and no one finds out for days? Each argument was designed to make me feel incompetent and helpless. Jasmine, my own daughter, began to echo the same phrases like a trained parrot. Dad, Kevin is right. Maybe it would be better for you to consider moving to a more manageable place. Seeing her gradually transform into that man's puppet was more painful than any direct insult. The daughter I had raised with so much love and sacrifice now saw me as an obstacle to her happiness. The psychological campaign intensified after they announced their engagement. Visits became more frequent, but also more tense. Kevin had started bringing real estate magazines and brochures for senior communities. I'm just exploring options for you. Luther, I want to make sure you have the best quality of life possible, he would say, spreading the materials on my coffee table, as if it were a business negotiation. But I had been doing my own research. One afternoon, when they went out to run wedding errands, I decided to call an old friend who worked in real estate. Silas, I need you to investigate something for me. I told him, there's a couple who are very interested in my apartment, and I want to know more about their real financial situation. What I discovered chilled me to bone. Kevin and Jasmine were neck deep in debt. The wedding they were planning cost more than $50,000, completely financed with credit cards and personal loans. The apartment they were renting was on the verge of eviction for non-payment. The luxury cars they drove were financed with payments they couldn't afford. Their lifestyle was facade built on suffocating debt. Everything started to make sense. The rush to get married, the insistence that I move, the constant comments about my economic vulnerability. It wasn't love that had united this couple. It was the desperate need to find a solution to their financial problems. And my apartment, located in one of the most exclusive areas of the city, was their lifeline. The revelation hit me like a slap to the soul. My daughter, the girl I had raised with values of honesty and hard work, had chosen the easy path of manipulation and deceit. She had allowed an ambitious man to convince her to see her own father as a resource to be exploited, instead of a person to be loved and respected. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, their attempt became more aggressive. Luther, you can't keep being so selfish. Kevin had said to me just 3 days before the ceremony, Jasmine and I have sacrificed so much for this marriage. The least you can do is help us with housing. His words no longer even wore the mask of fake concern. It was a direct demand disguised as a family favor. That night, I had made a decision that would change everything. I called Mr. Brooks, my financial advisor, and the only man I had completely trusted since my wife Eleanor's death. Brooks, I need you to prepare some documents. It's possible I'll very soon have to reveal information I've kept secret for years. His voice had become serious immediately. Mr. Hughes, are you sure this is the right time? He had warned me with the wisdom of someone who had handled my affairs for more than a decade. Once this information is public, you can't take it back. The consequences could be devastating for family relationships. But I had already made up my mind. The family I had tried to protect with my silence had chosen to betray me. And now, sitting in my truck in the ballroom parking lot, waiting for Mr. Brooks to arrive with the documents that would change everything, I realized the moment of truth had come. 25 more minutes, and Kevin, Jasmine, and all those guests who had looked at me with pity would discover who Luther Hughes really was. 25 more minutes, and their perfect worlds built on lies and greed would crumble like sand castles. The night breeze rustled the tree leaves around the parking lot, creating dancing shadows under the lights. It was strangely poetic that on such a beautiful night, so many illusions were about to die forever. 20 minutes had passed since my call to Brooks, and every second felt like an eternity. From my truck, I could see the golden lights of the ballroom, hear the cheerful music and laughter spilling out of the open windows. It was surreal to think that in just a few minutes, that celebration would turn into a nightmare for the main players. I closed my eyes and let the most painful memories of the last few months flood my mind. I needed to remember exactly why I had reached this point of no return. The biggest humiliation had happened just 2 weeks before the wedding, during what Kevin had called an important family meeting. He had arrived at my apartment, accompanied not only by Jasmine, but also by his parents. A perfectly planned ambush. "Luther, we want to talk to you about your future." Kevin's mother, a haughty woman who looked at me as if I were a bothersome insect, had begun. "We believe it's time for you to make responsible decisions about your life," continued Kevin's father, a burly man who had surveyed my apartment with the eyes of an appraiser evaluating a property. "At your age, living alone in such a big place is not only unnecessary, but dangerous. What if you have a medical emergency and no one finds out for days?" Their words were rehearsed, too perfect to be spontaneous. Jasmine had remained silent throughout the conversation, nodding occasionally like a well-trained puppet. Seeing her there, sitting next to a family that treated me like an obstacle, was like watching the son I had raised die before my eyes. "Dad," she finally said in a voice I no longer recognized. "They're right. Kevin and I have been talking, and we think it will be better for everyone if you move to a place more appropriate for your age." "Appropriate for my age," I repeated, feeling the anger begin to boil inside me. "And who gets to decide what's appropriate for me?" "You." Kevin's mother exchanged a knowing look with her husband, as if my words confirmed something they had already discussed. "Luther, we understand this can be difficult to accept, but you must think about what's best for Jasmine and Kevin." "What's best for them?" I murmured, beginning to understand the true dimension of conspiracy that had been woven behind my back. "And I suppose my apartment would be perfect for them to start their married life, right?" The awkward silence that followed my question was all the answer I needed. They had planned every detail of this conversation, every argument, every psychological pressure. Kevin took control at that moment, deploying his full arsenal of emotional manipulation. "Luther, it's not just about the apartment. It's about your well-being. We've been doing research, and we found a wonderful residence for people your age. It has 24-hour medical services, social activities, prepared meals. You can make friends with people who understand what you're going through." His fake smile made me nauseous. "What I'm going through?" I asked, feigning confusion. "And what exactly do you think I'm going through, Kevin?" He looked at Jasmine for support before answering. "Well, loneliness, financial uncertainty, the fear of not being able to take care of yourself. It's normal at your age. Luther, you don't have to be ashamed of needing help." The audacity of this 28-year-old man telling me what was normal at my age left me speechless for a moment. But then I saw something in his eyes that chilled me. The absolute certainty that he had a right to my life, my home, my decisions. To him, I was no longer a person with autonomy, but an obstacle to be removed with as little resistance as possible. "We've run the numbers," Kevin's father continued, pulling out a folder they had clearly prepared in advance. "The cost of the residence will be approximately $2,500 a month. With the sale of your apartment, you'd have enough money to cover it for many years. And there would still be some left over to help Jasmine and Kevin with their initial marriage expenses." There was the naked raw truth. It wasn't about my well-being or my safety. It was about money. It was about converting my home into cash to finance their unsustainable lifestyle. And if I refuse? I asked, although I already knew the answer. "Luther," Jasmine said, her voice sounding rehearsed, "we hope it won't be necessary to take more drastic measures. But if your mental health deteriorates to the point that you can't make rational decisions, the implicit threat was crystal clear. If I didn't cooperate voluntarily, they would seek legal ways to declare me incompetent. They had done their research. They had planned. They had prepared the ground to take everything I owned by force, if necessary. The daughter I had raised with so much love was sitting right there, allowing strangers to threaten her own father. That night, after they left with my firm refusal, I cried for the first time in years, not out of sadness, but for the definitive death of the illusions I had held about my family. I had called Mr. Brooks immediately. "I need you to investigate something urgently," I had told him through tears. "I want to know exactly what the real financial situation is for my daughter and her fiancé. Everything. Debts, income, liabilities, everything." The results of that investigation had been devastating. Jasmine earned $45,000 annually as a teacher, but had debts of more than $80,000 on credit cards. Kevin worked part-time as a personal trainer, making maybe $4,000 a year, but spent as if he had an executive salary. Together, they owed more than $120,000, not counting the loans they had taken out for the wedding. The apartment they were renting was 3 months behind on payments. The luxury cars they drove were financed with payments they couldn't afford. Their main credit card was maxed out, and they had started using cash advances to pay other debts. They were in a financial freefall, and my apartment represented their only hope of salvation. But there was something else in Brooks's report that had completely broken my heart. For the past 6 months, Jasmine had been regularly calling banks and insurance companies, asking about loans against her elderly father's property. She had been asking about legal procedures to obtain financial power of attorney over senior citizens. My own daughter had been planning my systematic dispossession for months. The most painful information had come at the end of the report. According to a private investigator Brooks had hired, Kevin had been telling his friends that he had sacrificed himself by getting engaged to a plain woman because her father had valuable properties and no competitive heirs. To him, marrying Jasmine wasn't love. It was a strategic investment in my estate. That revelation had been the final straw. For weeks, I had considered simply revealing my true financial situation to them, thinking that maybe the shock would make them reconsider their behavior. But after reading that report, I understood that it wasn't about money or desperation. It was about a pure, calculated greed that had corrupted my daughter until she was unrecognizable. The days leading up to the wedding had been torture. Every phone call from Jasmine was a new pressure to reconsider my position. Every visit from Kevin included poisonous comments about my stubbornness and selfishness. They had started to treat me as if I were already a senile old man whose opinions didn't matter. The night before the wedding, Jasmine had made her last attempt. "Dad, tomorrow is the most important day of my life. Please don't ruin it by being difficult. Kevin just wants what's best for all of us." Her words had been the final confirmation that I had lost my daughter forever. The woman who was getting married the next day was no longer the girl I had raised with so much love and sacrifice. And now, sitting in my truck, waiting for Mr. Brooks, I realized that everything had led to this inevitable moment. It wasn't about revenge or cruelty. It was about justice. It was about showing them the consequences of their actions. It was about teaching them that some lines should never have been crossed. 15 more minutes, and everything would change forever. My hands trembled as I dialed the number for Joseph, my neighbor from the apartment next door. A 70-year-old man who had been a silent witness to all the tense visits of the last few months. "Joseph, it's Luther. I need to ask you for a very important favor," I said, my voice shaking. "Could you go to my apartment and bring me the brown folder from the second drawer of my desk?" "Yes, right now. It's urgent." Joseph had been like a brother to me since Eleanor passed away, and I knew I could trust him without him asking questions. While I waited, I remembered a conversation I had with Joseph just a week earlier. he had witnessed from his balcony. When Kevin arrived with a real estate appraiser, without notifying me, Luther, that boy brought a man with a briefcase who was measuring your apartment from the outside. He had told me with obvious concern in his voice. When they saw me, they left quickly. I don't like what's happening at all. Joseph had been the first to notice the subtle changes in Jasmine's behavior over the last few months. Your daughter doesn't greet me like she used to, he had observed. She used to stay and chat with me when she came to visit. Now she rushes in and out as if she's ashamed of something. His words had confirmed what my heart already knew. I had lost my daughter long before the slap that night. The folder I had asked Joseph for contained documents no one in my family had ever seen. Bank certificates, property titles, investment records. That Eleanor and I had kept secret for decades. Documents that proved the poor widower living on a modest pension was actually a man with enough resources to change lives with a single decision. 10 minutes later, Joseph appeared in the parking lot with the folder in his hands. Luther, what's going on? You look very upset. He asked as he handed me the documents. It has to do with Jasmine's wedding. I explained briefly what had happened in the ballroom, and I saw his face harden with every detail. That man is a snake, he muttered. I always knew it. Joseph, in a few minutes, a man named Brooks will arrive. When you see him, tell him I'm waiting for him here, I asked. And Joseph, after tonight, many things are going to change. I want you to know you have always been like family to me. His eyes filled with tears as he nodded. You're family to me too. Luther, do what you have to do. As Joseph returned to the building, I opened the folder and began to review documents I hadn't looked at in months. The first was a bank statement showing a balance of $5 million, $400,000, in an investment account. The second was a property title for a downtown office building that generated monthly rent of $50,000. The third was a deed to a beach house I had bought as an investment 10 years ago. Eleanor had been a genius at investments, starting with a small catering business and turning it into a silent empire. Together, we had made a decision to live modestly, to protect our privacy and our family security. Visible wealth attracts problems. Eleanor used to say, invisible wealth gives you power. I never imagined I would have to use that power against my own daughter. Each document in that folder represented years of hard work and smart decisions. The hardware store where I worked 3 days a week wasn't because I needed the money, but because I liked to stay active and connected to community. The old truck I drove wasn't due to economic limitations, but because I had learned that unnecessary ostentation only brings problems. My apartment, the one Kevin so coveted, was actually the least valuable property in my portfolio. I had bought it not for its economic value, but for the memories it held. It was where Eleanor and I had spent our last years together, where we had planned our future, where she had passed away in my arms after a brave battle with cancer. But there was something else in that folder that would change everything for Jasmine and Kevin. For the last 3 years, since my daughter had started having financial problems, I had been secretly paying many of her debts. The credit card payments she thought came from a work bonus were actually coming out of my account. The special discount on her rent that she had negotiated with her landlord was money I transferred monthly. Without Jasmine knowing, I had been subsidizing her irresponsible lifestyle for years. The luxurious apartment they lived in, the car he drove, even some of the expenses for the wedding that was taking place at that very moment had been made possible by my secret financial support. I had thought I was helping my daughter through a difficult time, not realizing I was financing her transformation into a person I didn't recognize. The bank record showed monthly transfers totaling $4,500 that had kept the sinking ship of Jasmine's financial life afloat. Money she thought came from work bonuses or tax refunds, when in reality it was her father desperately trying to protect her from the consequences of her irresponsible decisions. The irony was devastating. While Kevin was humiliating me for being an economic burden on their future marriage. I was literally the only reason they could afford that marriage. While they were planning to strip me of my apartment to solve their financial problems, I had been solving those problems in secret for years. I closed the folder and looked toward the ballroom once more. The lights were still shining. The music was still playing. The guests were still celebrating. But in less than 5 minutes, Mr. Brooks would arrive with the final documents I needed. In less than 5 minutes, the process of cutting all the financial threads I had used to protect a daughter who had chosen to betray me would begin. This is not revenge, I reminded myself. This is justice. This is about teaching them that actions have consequences, that greed has a price, that family is not something you can sell for economic convenience. I had tried to protect Jasmine from reality for too long, and that protection had corrupted her until she was unrecognizable. Headlights of a car approached the parking lot, illuminating the night with a white light that momentarily blinded me. It was Mr. Brooks, punctual as always, arriving with the documents that would change everything forever. I got out of my truck and walked toward him, feeling how each step took me further away from the Luther I had been, and closer to the man I needed to become. "Mr. Hughes," Brooks said as he got out of his car, a legal brief under his arm. "Are you completely sure about this? Once we go in there will be no way to undo what is about to happen." I looked toward the ballroom one last time, where my daughter and her new husband were probably still celebrating their victory over the useless old man they had just humiliated. I have never been more sure of something in my life. Brooks, it's time for them to meet the real Luther Hughes. Brooks opened his folder under the parking lot light and began to show me the documents he had prepared with his characteristic efficiency. "Mr. Hughes, here is the order for the immediate suspension of all bank transfers you have been making in Jasmine Hughes's name," he said, pointing to the first paper. "Also, here is a notice of cancellation of the lease agreement that you had confidentially guaranteed. The landlord will receive this document tomorrow morning." I took the papers with trembling but determined hands. Each document represented a thread that I had carefully woven for years to protect my daughter, and now I was cutting those threads one by one. "And the payment for the ballroom?" I asked, although I already knew the answer. "Canceled," Brooks confirmed. "The deposit you had guaranteed will be withdrawn tonight. They will have until tomorrow to find an alternative form of payment." The magnitude of what I was about to do hit me like a cold wave. For 3 years, I had been the invisible safety net that had kept Jasmine and Kevin's lives afloat. The apartment they lived in, the car he drove, even the wedding that was taking place at that very moment, had all been made possible by my secret financial support. And now, in a single night, I was going to withdraw all that support definitively. "Brooks, I want you to understand something," I said to him, as I signed each document with a determination I hadn't felt in years. "This is not cruelty or revenge. This is the only way for them to learn the real value of things. For too long I protected them from the consequences of their actions, and that protection corrupted them into people I don't recognize." "I understand perfectly, Mr. Hughes," Brooks replied with genuine respect in his voice. "In my 30 years as a financial advisor, I have seen many families destroyed by greed and ingratitude. What you are doing requires more courage than most people possess." His words gave me the final strength I needed to take the last step. We walked together toward the ballroom entrance, and with each step, I could feel my heart beating faster. It wasn't nervousness I felt. It was a strange mix of sadness for what I had lost and anticipation for what I was about to regain. My dignity, my self-respect, my right to be treated as a human being instead of as a resource to be exploited. The music stopped abruptly when we entered the ballroom. 130 pairs of eyes turned toward us, and I could see the confusion on the guests' faces. Some recognized Mr. Brooks immediately. After all, He had handled the financial affairs of several prominent families in the city for decades. His presence at social events usually meant that something important was about to happen. Kevin was the first to react. "What are you doing here, Luther?" He shouted at me from the center of the dance floor, where he had been posing for photos with Jasmine. "You already left once. Wasn't that enough drama for one night?" His voice carried that arrogance I had come to know so well, but I could detect a note of nervousness that hadn't been there before. "Ladies and gentlemen," Brooks said in a clear, professional voice, "I apologize for interrupting this celebration, but I have urgent legal matters to discuss with Mrs. Jasmine Hughes and Mr. Kevin Dawson." The silence that followed was so deep you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Some guests began to pull out their cell phones. Sensing they were about to witness something extraordinary, Jasmine slowly approached, her face pale and her eyes full of confusion. "What's going on here, Dad?" she asked me, in a voice that no longer sounded as confident as it had when she had humiliated me just minutes before. "Who is this man, and why is he talking about legal matters?" I could see her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted her veil, a nervous gesture she had had since childhood. "Jasmine," I said in a voice firmer than it sounded in months, "this is Mr. Brooks, my financial and legal advisor. He has come to deliver some documents that I think you will find very enlightening." Brooks opened his folder and took out the first document. "Mrs. Jasmine Hughes, you are hereby notified that the financial guarantee your father had provided for your lease agreement has been immediately canceled. Your landlord will be notified tomorrow morning, and you will have 30 days to find a new guarantor or vacate the property." All the color drained from Jasmine's face. "Financial guarantee," she murmured, looking at me with eyes that were beginning to fill with comprehension and horror. "Dad, what is he talking about?" But I could see from her expression that a part of her already knew. For years, she had suspected that her financial luck wasn't completely natural, but she had chosen not to ask questions because the answers might have been uncomfortable. "Also," Brooks continued relentlessly, "the monthly transfers of $4,500 that your father had been making to your personal accounts have been permanently suspended. This includes payments for credit cards, car insurance, and various other expenses that you believe were being covered by other sources." Kevin let out a gasp that echoed throughout the ballroom. "That's impossible," he exclaimed, running toward us, his tuxedo looking out of place. "Luther doesn't have money. Look how he lives. Look at his clothes, his truck. He's an old man living on a miserable pension." His hysteria was evident, and several guests began to murmur among themselves with increasing fascination. Finally, Brooks said, taking the last document from his folder, "The guarantee payment for this celebration has also been canceled. The ballroom management will have the right to demand full payment before guests can leave tonight." His words fell on the ballroom like a bomb, and I could see some guests nervously begin to move toward the exits. The realization hit Jasmine like a hammer. "You!" she muttered, looking at me with eyes that couldn't fully process what they were hearing. All this time, you've been paying for everything." Her voice broke on the last word, and for a moment, I saw the small girl she had once been, vulnerable and confused. "For 3 years, Jasmine," I confirmed in a voice that sounded strangely calm, after the emotional storm I had been living through. 3 years in which I thought I was helping you get through a difficult time. 3 years in which I believed you would eventually recover and become the woman I raised. 3 years in which I hoped you would remember the values I taught you." Kevin began to pace in circles, clutching his head with increasing desperation. "This can't be happening. This can't be real," he screamed, as the guests watched him with a mix of horror and morbid fascination. "You're a poor old man. You work at a hardware store. You drive a rusted truck. You can't have money." "Appearances are deceiving, Kevin," I said finally, feeling decades of careful performance come to an end. "For years, I chose to live simply because my wife and I believe that visible wealth attracts problems. It turns out we were right. It's just that the problems came from where we least expected them. The music had stopped completely, and the only sound in the ballroom was the agitated breathing of the newlyweds and the growing murmurs of the guests, who were beginning to understand that they were witnessing something completely unexpected. Some were already recording with their phones, instinctively knowing that the story would become urban legend. "Dad," Jasmine said, her voice broken, "please, there has to be some way to fix this. The wedding, the guests, everything." But I could see in her eyes that she was finally beginning to understand the magnitude of what she had lost. Not just money or financial support. She had lost her father, the man who had loved her unconditionally for 35 years. "The only way to fix this, Jasmine," I replied, "was not to break in the first place." The silence in the ballroom became deafening. 130 guests held their breath as they processed what they had just heard. Kevin stood motionless for the first time all night, his eyes darting between Brooks, the documents, and my face, as if trying to find a crack in the reality that was collapsing around him. Jasmine just stared at me with an expression I will never forget, a mixture of shock, belated comprehension, and absolute horror. "Mr. Hughes," Brooks said in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, "would you like me to proceed with reading the full financial details?" His question hung in the air like a sword over the newlyweds' heads. I could see several guests moving closer, fascinated by the drama unfolding before their eyes. "Please, Brooks," I replied with serenity I didn't know I possessed. "I think everyone deserves to know the full truth." Kevin tried to interrupt with a desperate shriek, but Brooks raised a hand and continued with the precision of a surgeon performing a delicate operation. Over the last 36 months, Brooks began consulting his documents. Mr. Luther Hughes has transferred a total of $162,000 to cover the living expenses of his daughter, Jasmine Hughes, and her fiancé. This includes $48,000 for rent payments, $44,000 for credit card payments, $18,000 for vehicle insurance, and $22,000 for miscellaneous expenses. A collective murmur swept through the ballroom. Some guests exchanged glances of astonishment. Others pulled out calculators on their phones to verify the figures. Kevin's mother, who had remained seated at the head table throughout the confrontation, slowly stood up, her face completely pale. Furthermore, Brooks continued relentlessly, "Mr. Hughes personally guaranteed the total cost of the celebration, including the ballroom, food, music, flowers, and photography, for an amount of $53,000. Money which, as I mentioned earlier, is no longer available to cover these expenses." Kevin finally found his voice, but what came out was more of a wail than coherent words. "This is impossible. It's a lie. No one can have so much money and live like a pauper." He turned to the guests as if looking for support, but found only fascinated faces, and some who were clearly amused by his desperation. "My dear Kevin," I said with a calm that contrasted dramatically with his hysteria, "you have just learned a very valuable lesson about judging people by appearances. For years, I chose to live simply because my wife, Eleanor, and I value privacy above ostentation. It turned out to be a very wise decision." Jasmine finally reacted, approaching me with hesitant steps. "Dad, please, there has to be an explanation. There has to be a way to resolve this. You can't destroy my life like this." Her voice broke on the last word, and for a moment I felt a pang of paternal pain that almost made me waver. "Destroy your life?" I repeated, feeling the anger begin to boil inside me again. "I'm destroying your life? Wasn't it your husband who slapped me in front of 130 people? Wasn't it you who stood by without saying a word while I was being humiliated? Wasn't it you who planned to strip me of my home?" The truth of my words resonated in the ballroom like church bells. Several guests nodded, clearly remembering the scene that had started all this drama. Some even had videos on their phones of the slap Kevin had given me, digital evidence of the cruelty that had triggered this revelation. "But that was different," Jasmine muttered. though her voice lacked conviction. "We didn't know. We didn't understand. We thought you really needed help." Her excuses sounded pathetic even to herself, and I could see some guests exchanging looks of contempt. "You didn't know?" I asked, my voice rising for the first time all night. "You didn't know you were planning a family ambush to pressure me into selling my home? You didn't know you had brought a real estate appraiser without my knowledge? You didn't know you had been investigating legal ways to declare me incompetent if I didn't cooperate?" With each question, Jasmine's posture shrank. Brooks took advantage of the moment to pull another document from his folder. "Mrs. Hughes, I must also inform you that your father has decided to amend his will. All assets that were previously designated for you to inherit have been redirected to charities dedicated to protecting seniors from family abuse." The impact of this declaration was like a silent explosion. Kevin staggered backward, as if he'd been physically hit. "You can't do that," he shrieked, his mask of composure finally falling completely. "We're your family. Jasmine is your only daughter. You can't disinherit her over a stupid fight." "A stupid fight?" I repeated, letting the words hang in the tension-filled air. "Is that how you describe a family conspiracy to strip an old man of his home? Is that how you justify slapping your wife's father on his own daughter's wedding day?" My voice had turned icy, and I could see some guests flinch. Kevin's father, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation, finally approached with an expression of poorly disguised panic. "Mr. Hughes, I think we're all a little upset by the emotions of the day. Maybe we could discuss this in private when things have calmed down a bit." His tone was that of a man who had just realized he had bet on the wrong horse. "There's nothing to discuss in private," I replied firmly. "Everything I had to say has been said here, in front of the same people who witnessed my humiliation. You chose to make this public, so my response will be public." The guests' heads moved between us, as if watching a tennis match, absorbed in every exchange. Brooks closed his folder with a dry snap that echoed throughout the ballroom. "Mr. Hughes, all documents have been delivered and explained. The legal effects will begin immediately." He turned to Jasmine and Kevin with a professional expression, but not without a certain satisfaction. "I suggest you contact your own legal and financial advisors as soon as possible." Kevin finally collapsed. He literally dropped into a nearby chair and began to cry with uncontrolled sobs that echoed through the ballroom. "Everything is ruined," he murmured through his tears. "Everything we planned, everything we worked for, it's all destroyed." His tuxedo was now wrinkled and his face red with shame. "No," I said, approaching him for the first time since the slap. "What's destroyed are the lies, the greed, and the lack of respect. What's destroyed is the illusion that you can treat people like objects and expect there to be no consequences." I stopped in front of him, forcing him to look up. "This is what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness." Jasmine went to her husband and placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. "Kevin, we have to find a way to fix this. There has to be something we can do." But even as she spoke, I could see in her eyes that she knew it was too late. Some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt. "There is a way to fix this, Jasmine," I said, looking her directly in the eyes for the first time in months without feeling pain. "You can learn from this. You can grow from this. You can become the people I hoped you would be before greed corrupted you." My voice softened slightly because despite everything, she was still my daughter. "But that growth will have to happen without my financial help, without my apartment, and without my inheritance. You will have to do it the hard way like everyone else does." The ballroom remained in absolute silence, every person present knowing that they were witnessing the definitive end of a family relationship. Brooks and I headed toward the exit, leaving behind a ballroom full of shocked guests, and a newlywed couple whose perfect world had collapsed in less than 30 minutes. As Brooks and I walked toward the exit, the silence behind us was interrupted by a voice I didn't expect to hear. "Wait, Luther." It was Lucy, Jasmine's younger cousin, who had been sitting at a table in the back throughout the confrontation. She ran toward us with tears in her eyes and an expression of absolute horror on her face. "Uncle Luther," Lucy said in a trembling voice, "I didn't know anything about this. I swear Jasmine never told me what they were planning with you." Lucy had always been my favorite niece, a 29-year-old who worked as a teacher and had maintained a close relationship with me even after Jasmine had distanced herself. If I had known what they were going to do to you, I would have tried to stop them. I stopped and looked at her, seeing in her eyes the same honesty I had known since she was a little girl. "I know, Lucy," I said softly, placing a hand on her cheek. "You have always been different. You've never seen people as opportunities or resources to be exploited." Her tears fell harder as she nodded, clearly devastated by her cousin's actions. "But why did you never tell us about the money?" Lucy asked with genuine confusion. "Why did you keep all this a secret for so many years?" It was a question that deserved an honest answer. "Because your Aunt Eleanor and I learned a long time ago that money changes people," I explained as some guests discreetly moved closer to listen. "We have seen families destroyed by inheritances, friendships ended by loans, and children who see their parents as walking pensions. We decided to live simply to protect the relationships that really mattered." Lucy nodded slowly, beginning to understand the wisdom behind my decisions. "But Jasmine," she was different before. "What happened to her?" "What happened to her was Kevin," I replied with sadness. "What happened to her was greed disguised as love. And me, in my effort to protect her, depriving her the chance to learn important lessons about responsibility." Brooks had respectfully stayed to the side during this exchange, but now he approached and murmured something in my ear. "Mr. Hughes, the ballroom manager is approaching. It seems he's already found out about the cancellation of the guaranteed payment." Indeed, I could see a burly man in a suit walking toward us with several papers in his hands and a very serious expression. "Mr. Hughes," the manager said in a tense voice, "I just received a payment cancellation notice that is highly irregular. The contract for the celebration is guaranteed until tomorrow morning. Can you explain what's happening here?" "Mr. Martinez," I replied, "the financial guarantee I provided for this celebration has been revoked due to extraordinary circumstances that have come to light tonight." I gestured toward Jasmine and Kevin, who remained in the center of the ballroom like statues of despair. "I understand," Martinez said. "And who will be responsible for the payment now?" "The total outstanding amount is $53,000. His voice was professional but firm. Jasmine finally reacted, approaching us with hesitant steps. "Mr. Martinez, there must be some misunderstanding. My dad, he can't just cancel payment like that. We're family." "Young lady," Martinez said, "the financial guarantee was provided by Mr. Hughes personally. He has the legal right to withdraw it. I now need someone to provide an alternative form of payment immediately, or I will be forced to suspend the event." Kevin approached, stumbling, his tuxedo now completely disheveled. "You can't do this," he yelled. "It's our wedding day. You can't ruin our wedding day over money." "Sir," Martinez replied, "I am not ruining anything. I am simply following the contract. If you cannot pay immediately, I will have to ask all guests to leave." The reality of the situation began to penetrate the minds of the guests. Some had already started to grab their bags and leave. "Dad," Jasmine said, approaching me with tears in her eyes, "please, I know what we did was wrong, but you can't destroy all this over a fight." "Jasmine," I replied with a calm that surprised me, "I am not destroying anything. You destroyed this when you chose greed over love. When you allowed your husband to publicly humiliate me instead of treating me with the respect I deserve as your father." "But what are we going to do?" Kevin asked in a desperate voice. "How are we going to pay for all of this?" "You're going to do what all responsible people do," I replied. "You're going to find ways to earn money honestly. You're going to learn to live within your means. You're going to discover what it means to work hard for the things you want." My voice had grown stronger. "You have my phone number," I said to them for the last time. "When you are ready to have a real conversation about respect, When you have learned what it means to earn things for yourselves, then we can talk. But first, you will have to find a way to solve the mess you created here all on your own." With those words, I turned and walked toward the exit with Brooks, leaving behind a ballroom full of chaos. 3 days after the wedding, my apartment had become a refuge of peace. Joseph had come over every morning with coffee, making sure I was okay after what he called the night Luther reclaimed his dignity. Jasmine had called 37 times. Kevin had sent 14 text messages, each more hysterical than the last. Brooks arrived that morning with news. "Mr. Hughes," he told me as we drank tea, "I have received reports. Jasmine and Kevin were evicted from their apartment yesterday. The ballroom has initiated legal proceedings to recover the debt. Their credit cards have been canceled. And where are they living now?" I asked, "With Kevin's parents," Brooks replied. "Apparently, it's a small apartment where 3 people already live. The situation is tense." That afternoon, Lucy arrived with my friend Silas, a real estate agent, and Joseph joined them. "Uncle Luther," Lucy began, "I've been investigating some things since the wedding night. Things I think you need to know before it's too late." She sat on my couch with a folder. "They had been planning this for more than a year," Silas said. "I found evidence that Kevin had been consulting with lawyers specializing in mental competency cases for seniors. They had a detailed plan to legally declare you incompetent and gain control over all your properties." Joseph leaned forward. "Luther, there's more. That night, I overheard Kevin talking on the phone. He was saying that the old man had ruined everything, but they still had Plan B." "Plan B?" I repeated. "They're telling everyone you've gone senile," Lucy said, squeezing my hand. "That the scene at the wedding was evidence you've lost touch with reality. They're building a case to declare that you can't handle your own affairs." The magnitude of the betrayal expanded before me. Now they were trying to use my justified response to their cruelty as evidence of mental incompetence. "But we have good news, too," Joseph intervened with a smile. He took out his cell phone. "Luther, remember that several guests were recording that night? Well, some of those videos have gone viral. People aren't seeing a senile old man. They're seeing a dignified man revealing the truth about abuse." Silas leaned in. "Luther, the comments are overwhelmingly in your favor. People are praising your courage. You've become a symbol of resistance." Brooks nodded. "This public response will be invaluable if the case goes to court. But there's something else you need to know," I said. "If Jasmine and Kevin want to play this game, they are going to discover exactly who they're messing with." I stood up. I have been documenting everything. The intimidating visits, the implicit threats, the slap. I took out photographs of my swollen cheek. "If they want war," I continued, "they will have war, but it will be a war fought on my terms." Furthermore, I added, "I have decided to do something I should have done years ago. I am going to tell my full story publicly." 6 months later, I found myself sitting in a television studio. The program, Stories of a Lifetime, wanted to interview me. My story had become a national symbol. Catherine Diaz, the journalist, smiled at me. "Mr. Hughes, you have inspired thousands of people." During these 6 months, many things had changed. The legal case Jasmine and Kevin tried to build against me collapsed. Not only did they lose, but they were ordered to pay my legal fees. The bankruptcy that followed was swift. Jasmine lost her job. Kevin's reputation was ruined. They were now working part-time jobs, struggling to pay debts. We are live in 3, 2, 1. "Mr. Hughes," Catherine asked, "how does it feel to know that your story has inspired so many?" "I feel grateful," I replied, "grateful that my pain has served to help others." We talked about everything. The decision to live simply, the secret financial support I had provided, the conspiracy. "Mr. Hughes," Catherine said near the end, "do you have a message for your daughter?" I looked directly into the camera. "Jasmine, if you are listening, I still love you. I will always love you. But loving someone doesn't mean allowing them to abuse you. Loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing your dignity. The doors to my heart will always be open for you, but only if you can walk through them as the honorable woman I raised. Only if you can accept full responsibility for your actions. When the cameras turned off, the studio erupted in applause. That night, as I drove back to my apartment, I felt peace. I had told my story. I had defended my truth. 2 years have passed since that night. As I write these lines, I am sitting on my balcony. I decided to use my name for a charitable organization, the Luther Hughes Foundation for Protection of Seniors. We help seniors regain control over their finances and their dignity. Joseph is my vice president. Lucy is the educational director. We have recovered millions in properties for abused seniors. The question everyone asks me is if I miss Jasmine. I miss the child she was. But I don't miss the manipulation and disrespect. She tried to contact me 3 times. The last time was 3 months ago when Kevin left her, taking their baby son and half their possessions. She called to ask for money, never to apologize. "Dad, your pride is more important than your grandson," she said. "Jasmine," I replied, "my dignity is exactly as important as my grandson, and I hope one day he learns that lesson better than you did." I hung up. I have created a trust fund for my grandson, Oliver. It will be available when he turns 18. Maybe one day he will seek his own answers. My health has improved. My stress is gone. I found a new passion in the community garden. I teach others about growing food and resilience. Reflecting on these 2 years, I understand that my story does not have a traditional happy ending, but it has something better. It has authenticity. It has dignity. I have learned that sometimes the greatest demonstration of self-love is to walk away from those who insist on hurting you. If I could send a message to the past, to the Luther who walked into that ballroom, I would say, have courage. On the other side awaits a life more authentic than you ever imagined. My life at 70 is richer than it was at 68. I have proven that it is never too late to write a new chapter. When people ask me if I regret what I did that night, my answer is always the same. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see one new life story that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next Chronicle.